On a bright Saturday in Abuja, chaos erupted at the wedding reception of Emeka and Ada. Plates of jollof rice were flying across a small event hall in Wuse. Hungry guests shouted and argued over the meager food. Emeka ducked as a half-eaten piece of meat whizzed past his head. This was supposed to be the happiest day of his life, but now it was a disaster. How could a billionaire's family host a wedding this cheap? Welcome to Royal Beat Tales, a home of interesting stories. Just a few months earlier, Emeka was a young man struggling to make ends meet in the city. He lived in a tiny room in Nyanya, on the outskirts of Abuja. One afternoon, while shopping at the crowded Wuse market, Emeka met Ada. She was a quiet, polite young woman haggling over the price of tomatoes. Emeka noticed her simple dress and thought she looked humble. Then a trader whispered to him that Ada was the daughter of Chief Okafor, one of Abuja's billionaire businessmen. Emeka's heart raced with excitement. If he married Ada, he thought, all his money problems would disappear. He imagined living in a big mansion on Aso Drive with fancy cars and servants. A week later, he saw Ada at a small cafe near Jabi Lake Mall and introduced himself. She smiled and enjoyed his jokes. They started talking often. Ada liked Emeka because he was friendly and kind. Emeka liked Ada too, but deep down he was mostly excited about her family's wealth. On their first date, Emeka wanted to take Ada to a fancy restaurant in Wuse too. To his surprise, Ada chose a simple buka, local canteen, in Garki for jollof rice. Emeka was puzzled that a billionaire's daughter cared about saving money, but he agreed. They sat on a wooden bench, eating delicious but cheap food from metal plates. Ada even counted her small change to pay for extra plantain. Emeka forced a smile. He expected a billionaire's daughter to love luxury, but Ada lived simply like anyone else. A few weeks later, Emeka met Ada's parents at their home in Asokoro. Chief Okafor's compound was huge from the outside, but inside the house was plain. The air conditioner was turned off to save electricity, and the family offered only a warm soda and some groundnuts instead of a lavish meal. Emeka saw that despite their wealth, the Okafor family was extremely frugal. It was odd, but he told himself they were just humble. Soon, Emeka asked Ada to marry him, and she happily said yes. Chief Okafor gave a small nod of approval. Emeka was delighted. He believed he was about to become part of a billionaire family. He imagined a grand wedding with many gifts. But the Okafors insisted on a small wedding to avoid waste. They chose a modest hall in Wuse instead of a five-star hotel. Ada's mother bought a cheap wedding cake from Garki. Only 100 guests were invited, even though Emeka's relatives alone were nearly that many. Emeka's family grumbled that the Okafors were being stingy, but Emeka tried to keep the peace. On the wedding day, the decorations were plain and simple. There were no fresh flowers, only some reusable plastic ones. The food came in tiny portions, and it ran out before even half the guests were served. Drinks were so few that people had to share bottles of soda. Emeka watched in panic as guests murmured in annoyance. Some guests whispered, "Are these people really rich? Why is there not enough food?" Emeka had no answers. Ada was embarrassed, but her parents didn't seem to notice. They were just happy nothing was wasted. As the reception went on, the hungry guests lost their patience. One uncle even stood up and shouted that the party was too dry, no drinks and no meat. Others agreed and started yelling. A few angry guests began tossing their plates in protest. Emeka was horrified as the celebration turned into chaos. Ada cried as her mother quickly packed up the little remaining food. What was meant to be a joyful day had become a mess. Emeka now realized marrying for money was not going to be a smooth ride. After the wedding, Emeka moved in with Ada. He expected to live in a luxurious mansion in Maitama or Asokoro. Instead, the Okafors gave the couple a modest flat in Kubwa, a far cheaper suburban area. "It's peaceful and cheap to maintain," Chief Okafor said proudly. Emeka tried not to look disappointed. The flat had basic furniture and no generator, so they often lit candles when power went out. Ada didn't mind and stayed thrifty. She cooked simple meals like beans and gari, and she refused costly outings. When Emeka suggested going to Jabai Lake Mall or seeing a movie, Ada shook her head. Emeka grew frustrated living such a basic life while knowing his in-laws were billionaires. Emeka had expected a new car, but the chief lent them only an old Toyota that kept breaking down. Emeka had even quit his job before the wedding, assuming his father-in-law would offer him a good position or money to start a business. But whenever he brought up money or work, Chief Okafor just said, "Work hard and save." We all start small. There was no job offer, no cash gift. Emeka was stunned that a man so rich would not help his own son-in-law. Ada told Emeka to be patient and look for a job himself. Emeka felt cheated by his own assumptions. One afternoon, Emeka decided to snoop around for answers. While Ada was out, he slipped into the main house in Asokoro. In the study, he found bank statements and property documents showing the Okafors had billions of naira and many luxurious properties. Emeka's hands trembled. The family was truly rich, but hiding it by living simply. Just then, Chief Okafor walked in and caught Emeka snooping. Emeka froze in fright. Chief Okafor's eyes were serious. "Yes, we have money, but we don't waste it," he said quietly. He then added, looking hard at Emeka, "I hope you didn't marry my daughter just for our money." Emeka's heart skipped a beat. He quickly shook his head and forced a smile, saying he truly loved Ada. The chief left with a stern look, and Emeka felt a chill. It was clear Ada's father was suspicious of him. That night, Emeka carefully suggested to Ada that maybe her father could help fund a small business idea he had. Ada shook her head. She said her family believed in hard work and not asking for handouts. She reminded him that her father started as a small trader and built his empire by saving every naira. "We shouldn't ask him for money. We can succeed on our own," Ada insisted. Emeka felt frustrated and trapped in a poor life despite all the wealth around, but he hid his anger and nodded. Late that night, Emeka lay awake, sweating in the darkness because the fan was off to save power. He realized he had to do something. His dream of an easy, wealthy life was slipping away. If the Okafors wouldn't share their wealth, he would have to find another way. A risky idea formed in his mind. He remembered an old friend, Musa, who had gotten involved with some bad people. Musa once said if Emeka ever needed special help, he should call. With trembling fingers, Emeka dialed Musa's number. The following week, Emeka put his plan into action. He arranged with Musa and a few thugs to fake his own kidnapping. They would demand a huge ransom from Chief Okafor, expecting the family to pay to save him. Emeka was sure Ada's tears would make her father agree. He promised to give Musa's group a cut once they got the money. A few days later, when Ada was out at work, Emeka vanished according to plan. That afternoon, a gruff caller rang the Okafor house and demanded 50 million naira for Emeka's release. Ada was terrified and begged her father to pay. Chief Okafor stayed calm and replied, 50 million? I don't pluck money from a tree. I can only offer 5 million naira. Emeka was tied up in the gang's hideout when he heard Chief Okafor's stubborn reply. His heart sank. He never expected his life would be valued so cheaply. The kidnappers were angry too. They had expected a huge payday, but now it looked like they would get almost nothing. Emeka's grand plan was collapsing, and real fear set in. The fake kidnapping spiraled out of control. Musa and his gang were unhappy. They had expected a huge payday, but now they suspected the Okafors might not pay much at all. One of the gang members, a tough man with a scar on his face, thought Chief Okafor was lying about not having money. "These rich people always claim to be poor," he muttered. Emeka was tied to a chair in a dusty room in an unfinished building on the city outskirts. He tried to stay calm, but as evening came, he overheard the kidnappers arguing. "If they only pay 5 million, it's hardly worth the risk," one said. Another snarled, "Maybe we should teach that family a lesson. They think we're joking." Emeka's heart pounded. This was not part of the plan. "Remember, I'm your friend. This is fake," he cried out nervously. The men glared at him. They were no longer treating it as fake. To them, a low ransom was as bad as betrayal. Back at the Okafor house, Ada couldn't sleep. She was worried sick about Emeka. She begged her father to increase the ransom offer, but Chief Okafor refused. "We can't just hand whatever they want. What if they take the money and still hurt him? Number 5 million is enough. If he is sensible, he will find a way to escape," he said firmly. Ada prayed through the night for her husband's safety, while Emeka was facing the consequences of his own scheme. The next morning, tragic news spread through Abuja. A body was found near the city gate. It was Emeka. The kidnappers had fled and left him behind when they didn't get the ransom. Emeka had been badly injured trying to escape in the dark, and by the time help came, it was too late. Ada was heartbroken. She cried for days, unable to believe that her husband was gone. Chief Okafor and his wife were full of grief and guilt. They never imagined their stinginess would help lead to such a terrible loss. At the quiet funeral in Abuja, the sky was gray and somber. Chief Okafor arranged a simple burial with a plain wooden coffin. Even in that sad moment, he avoided spending on anything fancy. Friends and family whispered about how greed and stinginess led to this tragedy. Ada held a single flower and said goodbye to Emeka with tears in her eyes. She loved him, but perhaps never truly understood his desperation for wealth. The Okafors learned too late that saving money at all costs could cost them something far greater. In the end, Emeka's greedy plan and the Okafors' stinginess cost a life. The story became a cautionary tale in Abuja about marrying for money and being too stingy. It was a tragic ending, and the lesson was clear. Some things, like life and love, are far more precious than money. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like, and comment for more interesting stories.